Welcome to the Festival of Dangerous Ideas podcast. My name is Danielle Harvey and I'm the festival director. Over the coming months, we look forward to sharing with you the audio recordings from the 2022 festival. FODI started in 2009 and is the original Disruptive Ideas Festival. FODI exists to bring to light important conversations that push the boundaries of conventional thought. From Russia and China to America, Turkey and beyond, illiberal leaders have used corruption, machismo, disinformation, propaganda and violence to stay in power and expand their influence for decades. With authoritarianism now governing over 60% of the world's population, are we witnessing a backslide in democracy and a more efficient model of governance emerging? Join historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat as she examines the authoritarian playbook, how strongmen think and what drives them. This is the FODI 2022 discussion, Return of the Strongman.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you, Lydia. I'm delighted to be here. So we are living through historic times. The global clash between democracy and autocracy is coming to a head. Authoritarianism is ascendant and now governs over 60% of the world's population. Yet the spread of illiberal rule has sparked an unprecedented wave of resistance. 2019 was a record year for nonviolent protest around the world. In 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, the largest protest movement in U.S. history unfolded. Black Lives Matter engaged around 20 million people in the U.S. and millions more abroad, contributing to the defeat of America's first autocratic president. Authoritarian states have long claimed that they offer a more efficient model of governance than democracy. Yet they bring ruin to societies. They are linked for profit motives to energy sources that accelerate the climate crisis. They plunder businesses. And let me just do my slide. Here we go. Their corruption, repression squanders human and other capital and forces millions of people into exile. At a time when we face climate, health, food, and other crises, the priority of authoritarian states is not public welfare or saving the planet, but maintaining stability and, above all, keeping the leader in power. Those resisting around the world today know that strongmen don't just endanger democracy, but pose an existential threat to humanity. That's why it's more important than ever to understand how strongman leaders think and operate. Knowing the patterns that govern their behavior lets us see who they are when they first appear, predict their actions, and resist them with maximum efficiency. For 100 years, charismatic leaders have found favor at moments of uncertainty and transition, when traditional parties and political systems no longer seem to meet the needs of the moment. Often coming from outside the political system, they create new movements and political alliances, and they communicate with their followers in original ways. Picking up on powerful drives and resentments, they present themselves as the vehicles for obtaining what is most wanted, whether it's territory, jobs, safety from racial enemies, or revenge for mistreatment by foreign powers. Authoritarians also appeal when societies have made gains in gender, class, or racial equity and emancipation. They soothe fears of the loss of male domination, elite privilege, and the end of white Christian civilization. So how do you spot a strongman on the rise? Today, many of them come to office via elections, and they use their campaigns to test out society's tolerance for lawless behavior. Some of them profess their sympathies for violence or a personal capacity for violent acts, and that's how they set themselves apart from other candidates. In countries with a history of dictatorship, they may hold up that violent past as a model, a positive thing. That's what Jair Bolsonaro did in Brazil. In the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte talked fondly about having thrown people out of helicopters and said he'd do it again when he was running for office. And here we have Trump, who boasted very early in his campaign about shooting someone on Fifth Avenue and not losing any followers. From the start, they tell us who they are and what they intend to do. Conservative elites are the strongmen's most important promoters and enablers. Afraid of losing their class, gender, or race privileges, influential individuals bring the aspiring strongman into the political system, thinking that he can be controlled, and it usually doesn't work out that way. They strike an authoritarian bargain, as it's known, with the leader. Prosperity for them in return for loyalty and toleration of his violence and suppression of rights. And here's something that has not changed for 100 years. It's amazing. Those who sign on tend to stick with the leader no matter what he does. A recent example is the US Republican Party continuing to support Trump after his coup attempt. Or within that, former Vice President Mike Pence, who still comes out in support of Trump publicly, even though Trump tried to have him kidnapped, harmed, or killed on January 6th. So these are things that can be explained through authoritarian dynamics. So that brings us to personality cults and the leader relationship with elites and followers. And they are key to the operation of authoritarianism. They present the leader, and this also hasn't changed for 100 years. The leader is a man of the people, but he's also a man above all other men. Strongmen expertly use the latest media technologies, whatever they are at that moment, to seem omnipresent and godly. So in Nazi Germany, the Nazis used the latest audio technology and they did experiments and research on speakers so that Hitler's radio addresses would be as reverberant as possible. And Modi used holograms to appear at many places, many rallies simultaneously when he ran for office. When authoritarian states puff up personality cults, you know there's trouble brewing. Could be growing disaffection in society, a crackdown coming or on the way, or foreign aggression. In China, we've seen a real inflation of Xi Jinping's personality cult recently. And that's accompanied and is responding to increased domestic discontent from lockdowns and the economy, exposure of human rights crimes against Muslims, and Western pushback about its imperialist claims in Taiwan. And this is an article from Radio Free Asia that some people within the party are warning that they don't like this inflation of the personality cult. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the authoritarian playbook. I'm going to focus on propaganda, machismo, corruption, and violence, and how they interact. So tool one is propaganda. Maintaining the leader's personality cult is a key task of propaganda, which is a set of communication strategies designed to discourage critical thinking and to persuade people that reality is what the leader says it is. From Mussolini's use of newsreels to Trump's use of Twitter and Modi's lively Instagram, you should check out Modi's Instagram. Having a direct communications channel, unmediated, with the people to cement the leader-follower bond, that's crucial. That's also why they use rallies. That's important. And here's a paradox. The more skilled the leader is at this mediatized politics, the more his admirers see him as genuine. Now, propaganda may seem to be all about noise, but silence is something equally important to its operation, and we don't hear about that as much as we should. Strongmen disappear people, but they also disappear knowledge that conflicts with their goals. Chilean dictator Pinochet closed down philosophy and social science departments, claiming they were laboratories of Marxism. In Hungary, Viktor Orban bans gender studies. And authoritarians everywhere ban books with LGBTQ themes and suppress climate change science. In the US, the Republicans disappeared discussions of racism from public education and try to intimidate academics into silence. And this is this thing called Professor Watch List, which exists because of the billionaire Koch family funds this Turning Point USA campus reform. And I seem to have been put on it for being like a radical leftist or whatever. And so they make a page for you, and at the bottom of the page there's a helpful phone number so people can call and complain about you and try and get you fired. So the idea is that you'll feel worried and you won't speak out anymore. So we'll move on to machismo. Machismo binds the strongmen's tools of rule. And I found when I was researching strongmen that in political science, masculinity wasn't taken that seriously. And so I decided to devote a chapter to it. And Strongman is really the first book that elevates masculinity, machismo, virility to a tool of rule alongside repression and corruption and propaganda. Women are as much the strongmen's enemies as prosecutors and the press. So are LGBTQ populations, whose persecution is a through line of authoritarianism around the world. The gender politics of authoritarianism rests on three pillars. You have institutionalized misogyny, so putting women down, exaltation of hypermasculine, brutal behavior, so certain model of manhood gets propped up, and suppression of other models of manhood and sexual identities. So you've got this triad. Mussolini and Putin bookend a century of the strongman use of bodily display to diffuse a certain idea of maleness. There's always a kind of hegemonic idea of masculinity, and it gets circulated through all the different media. This is from a 1935 fascist newsreel, which was pioneering. It was the first time a head of state had stripped his shirt off on camera and did manual labor. And he's threshing grain, so he's the man of the people. He's doing this ancient peasant rite. But he's wearing these futuristic pilot's goggles and a hat so that he's not really only the man of the people, he's something more. Putin reprised this baring of the pectorals. This is from a whole series that when he was on vacation in 2007 in Siberia. And you know there's a Kremlin-approved calendar with a Putin for every month, which it's a real thing. It comes out every year. So this is a whole series of him with no shirt on here. But the Kremlin, this is the important point, the Kremlin doses out these hypermasculine images, and sometimes they are released when his power is threatened. So here he is, August 2019, the day that tens of thousands of Russians were protesting him in the streets. He shows up for a photo op with his friends, his biker club, wearing the leather jacket. Now, Trump, I know, I had to include this. He tried to join in the Naked Chest Club, but he had to borrow Sylvester Stallone's body from Rocky III. But this is important, and it's a personality cult product because this is not a retweet. Somebody in his entourage made this or used it. He was sent it from someone, and it's a direct tweet from his account. So this is how he wants to be seen, the fighter. So the strongman's masculine identity isn't just empty posturing, and it's easy to laugh at. We do laugh at these things, but they're deadly serious. It's really a sophisticated strategy of political legitimation. The appeal of these leaders lies in their ability to get away with things that other men cannot. And getting away with it is the essence of authoritarianism. So now that's how it interacts with corruption. It's our next tool. Strongmen personalize power, meaning their private political and financial interests prevail over national ones in the formulation of policy. So Trump spent 1/3 of his time, I'll never get over this, he spent 1/3 of his time in office visiting Trump-branded properties. So he had no interest in governing. The idea was he had autocratic goal to turn to turn public office into a way of making money. So he spent a third of his time visiting golf courses, and as long as it had the Trump name on it, he was there. Now, Putin has the most fully realized kleptocracy since that of Libyan dictator Gaddafi. He funnels profits from his plunder of state institutions into offshore accounts maintained by proxies and cronies. And even today, we hear more about how authoritarianism is supposed to be good for business than about actual examples of how autocrats ruin business. Putin has arrested over 70,000 business people. And Bill Browder, who I interviewed, told me, if you've got a business that's profitable, the state's going to come after you. In Turkey, Erdogan has seized over $32 billion worth of assets from followers of his, this guy he's obsessed with ruining, the Muslim cleric in exile, Fethullah Gulen. So financial corruption is important. And in fact, there are states where the state becomes a totally criminal enterprise. So right now, North Korea props up its economy with cybercrime. That's its biggest thing it does, is cybercrime. But I also cover in the book, it's really important, moral and professional corruption. How do you get people to collaborate? And collaboration is about getting people to accept things that were previously considered illegal or immoral, and making normal what was unthinkable. And in fact, strongmen specialize in bringing the unthinkable into being. They're innovators in lying, in corruption, in violence, both in terms of the things they do and the scale they do it at. Rulers who come into office with a criminal record, like Mussolini and Hitler, or under investigation. Putin, Trump, and Berlusconi were all under investigation when they first came into office. They know that making the government a refuge for criminals who don't have to learn to be lawless, they're already crooks, hastens the corruption process. So you want as many crooks in the government as possible. The other thing they do is grant pardons. What does pardons do? It frees up criminals for service. Why should they be in jail when they can be serving you and their talents are useful to you? The Nazis used to hire criminals who were expert at bribing people and threatening people. So this is from, I have a newsletter called Lucid, and it's all about threats to democracy, and it's just an essay I did called Pardon Me, about how they use pardons. So Mussolini, what does he do? The first thing he does when he becomes dictator in 1925, he pardons all the violent thugs, the squadrists, the black shirts, who helped him get to power. In Chile, Pinochet pardoned all the human rights abusers in 1978. And Trump is always promising pardons for people who were in his January 6th coup attempt. Corruption is also why strongmen establish inner sanctums, like the inner circle, composed of family, there's a lot of sons-in-law, they're always there, and sycophants. And these people keep his secrets and serve as liaisons with other criminals. So the brother of Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, he's very powerful in politics, but he also has reputed connections to the mob, the Kosovo mob. Berlusconi's right-hand man, Marcello Dell'Utri, was his liaison both with the Catholic sect Opus Dei and with the mafia. It was very economical and efficient, the same person for the church and the mafia. And he was convicted of a mafia association, this Dell'Utri. So, with the mention of the mafia, we get to violence. It's a great quote from Putin. There are 3 ways of influencing a person: blackmail, vodka, or the threat of murder. For 100 years, the strongmen and his enablers have led the societies they govern to think of harming others as justifiable, necessary, and even patriotic. The history of authoritarian violence is clear on what happens when polarization becomes survivalism. Me versus you, that's polarization, becomes me or you, and only one of us is going to live, right? And the key, studies on political violence show that you have to get people to consider the enemy an existential threat, and you have to feel you're in mortal danger. And there are a lot of survivalist ideologies going around now. One of the most common is great replacement theory. This conspiracy theory that goes back to Mussolini was always talking about it too, that whites will be extinguished because non-whites are having too many babies or they're coming in, there's some grand design to have them come in and overpopulate. And among the people who's very invested in great replacement theory is a woman who might be the next Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. In places where democracy still functions, you need to populate party and state institutions with violent individuals to help authoritarianism take hold. In 2019, in Modi's India, national legislators included 11 people who faced open cases for murder and another 10 who had been convicted of serious crimes. And fortunately, in America, the GOP is remaking itself, the Republican Party, into an autocratic entity. So moderates are being kicked out, and if you look who's coming in, they're lawless, extremist individuals. So if you want to get ahead and be a candidate for office now, you've got to make your campaign ad with an assault rifle. And participants, you think, who's being encouraged to run for office? Many of the people who were in January 6th, including people who breached the Capitol, are being encouraged to run for office. So this is Dr. Oz, who's running for Pennsylvania governor, and it's a 30-second campaign ad, and he's shown with 4 different weapons, including an assault rifle. So this is, you think, what are the qualities that societies want or parties want in a politician? And unfortunately, if authoritarianism is ascendant, they want violent people or people who can perform violence. So the violence the strongman unleashes is also his reaction to fear. He is secretly afraid of the people he represses. He's afraid of elites who can turn on him. And he's afraid of enemies who wish to remove him from the face of the earth. Fear is why he uses blackmail to tie people to him, why he throws on a cloak of masculine invincibility, and why he builds palaces and bunkers to hide in when his mismanagement catches up with him. So here we have Belarus dictator Lukashenko. In 2020, there were nonviolent protests, and the protesters were marching towards his palace. What does he do? He puts on a bulletproof vest. It's a panic reaction. He thinks he's looking strong, but it's a sign of insecurity. He gets his rifle, and he goes in a helicopter, and he's escaping his palace, basically. So this leads us to the strongman's fall. The authoritarian playbook has no chapter on failure. And this was very interesting doing the research. Every leader who, declines due to his own bad decisions is surprised at his fate and blames everybody but himself. Putin, for example, is particularly dangerous right now because he knows he made a big mistake in invading Ukraine. So I'm going to talk about Putin's downward arc because it's very much in the news. So Putin was ripe for a decision based on hubris and a lack of objective input. Over the last few years, he'd become more vulnerable. The pandemic had weakened the Russian economy. His popularity was decreasing, and so his need to jail his critics and deceive his people was increasing. So he isolated himself. And Joe Biden's victory, which was kind of a nightmare for him, it deprived him of access to the White House and a unique situation he had of leverage over a president whose business depended in part on Russian capital. So his authority at home was not imminently threatened or anything, but I think he had an intimation of a future decline or loss of status. And this is when strongmen act rashly to secure their authority and their place in history. They start wars, or they double down on ongoing, ruinous domestic or military initiatives. Political scientists even have a name for this: gambling for resurrection. Some big, grandiose action that's going to save you. And guess what? Most autocrats eventually lose the wager. So as soon as this war started, I had a very strong feeling that this was what was going on. And so 3 days after the invasion, I published an op-ed for MSNBC predicting that it might not go so well for Putin. Later it comes out, indeed, textbook case, Putin did not consult with most of his military command. He did not game out the consequences of possible sanctions with his economic advisors. Very few people were involved in this huge decision. And this is consistent with mistakes made by other autocrats I'd studied. That's why I was able to write this. They think they have all the answers, and they surround themselves with sycophants and people who tell them what they want to hear. Putin's war has brought catastrophe to Ukraine, displacing 13 million people, destroying cities with terroristic methods, war crimes on a daily basis. But it has not gone as planned. Ukraine has now recaptured many cities, over 1,000 kilometers of territory. NATO has been revitalized. And Zelensky is a democratic hero. Putin didn't see that coming. He thought Zelensky was going to just flee. And the war has exposed to the world how autocracies, the corruption and the repression of autocracies, ravage institutions, depriving them of resources and deprofessionalizing people who work within them. So it has been with the supposedly unbeatable Russian military, which has been shown to the world to have sustained devastating losses, including more generals killed in the first few months than during all of World War II. And now we have a situation where soldiers just don't want to fight. They're abandoning and running away. Such humiliations and the unexpected international unity around sanctions have unsettled Russian elites. And last week, an unprecedented thing happened. Municipal councils in St. Petersburg, where Putin got his start, and Moscow called for Putin to be removed from office. One of them wanted him charged with treason. The other told him he was a Cold War relic. And I'm quoting, "We ask for you to be relieved of your duties, as your views and governance model are hopelessly outdated." Now, these people were arrested, and in doing this, they likely knew it wasn't going to come, not much would come of it. They're also not Democrats. Their elites, the elites in Russia are heavily invested in the kleptocracy order. But they're pissed off because they want things to return to the way it was before Putin did this blunder. So Putin has set the stage for a possible future destabilization of his authority, the very thing this war was supposed to prevent. And sanctions against Russia have given us a primer on how to strike back at autocrats in the area they care most about, money. And the war has also prompted many countries to have a long overdue reckoning with the costs of dependence on fossil fuel. And it will accelerate the transition to clean energy. To combat authoritarianism, we also have to name and shame its many enablers. The PR firms, international law firms, wealth management firms that allow authoritarians like Putin to hide their money and fund their violence. And these enablers are, of course, located in democracies for extra hypocrisy, including the US, which is now a major global player in the kleptocracy services industry that supports these bad actors. Offshore finance it functions as much today in Delaware and South Dakota as in traditional British enclaves like the Virgin Islands. More broadly, some hard decisions have to be made about the presence of autocrats in the EU, NATO, and other organizations. From where I sit, every day that Orban, Hungarian leader, receives EU funding is a bad day for democracy. So, moving to my conclusion part. That's a great quote. Every country gets the gangster it deserves. My background studying fascism let me understand the danger Trump represented the first time I saw the guy at a rally. And I changed up my professional life to educate the public and journalists that Trump was not just a clown, he was not just a boaster, and he was out to destroy U.S. democracy and extricate the country from the democratic international order. And this was an op-ed I published right before Trump was inaugurated, predicting that he would be an authoritarian. It was frustrating to see how slowly the media and the public grasped the gravity of the situation. And yet, in writing Strongmen, I saw that wherever autocrats have appeared, societies have struggled to recognize the danger in front of their eyes. Acknowledging that it can happen here means giving up cherished notions about national identity. For example, that Germans are so cultured that a Hitler couldn't possibly have any traction there. Or in Chile, they said, well, we're not like our violent neighbors where you have all these coups. We're not going to have a coup here. Many Americans dismissed the idea that Trump's racism and his obsession with celebrity and winning might help him win the election because they reflected enduring traits of American society. These are difficult truths, and so people don't want to go there. In fact, the strongman's trick is to embody the national everyman with all of his endearing flaws. Mussolini struck the anti-fascist novelist Elsa Morante as, quote, the perfect mirror of today's Italian people. In Turkey, admirers of Erdogan think of him like an extended member of their family. And the writer Svetlana Alexievich, who's no fan of the Russian leader, has said, there is a little piece of Putin in everyone. Although we often hear that strongmen are genius strategists, few of them had a master plan for their rule. Their real talents are those of the street fighter and especially the con man. They make the most of opportunities offered to them, they're skilled in getting people to believe their lies, and they're willing to do anything, and I mean anything, necessary to get the authority they crave. Most of them ended up with more power than they ever imagined. Strongmen like Putin are doubling down now because they know their time is limited. Their scams are being revealed. They are rapaciously clinging to power, trying to exploit and hoard everything, because they are the old paradigm of leadership, and they have to do their best to block a new one from emerging. That knowledge gives us an opportunity. It's time for us to give democratic heroes and leaders the star treatment that's been lavished upon strongmen, and to support other models of exercising authority and other ways of being a leader. Why is this way of being with friends normal, and this way is taboo? Now that's a dangerous idea. A young female Democrat who stands up to Putin has just negotiated Finland coming into NATO and goes out partying. But there's no space for the every woman, superwoman in our current conceptions. We must develop models of power that see care and compassion and collaboration as strengths and not weaknesses. We've got to rethink power. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight, but there's way too much at risk for us not to try. Thank you.
This session was recorded live at Carriageworks, Sydney. The Festival of Dangerous Ideas is presented by the Ethics Centre. The Ethics Centre delivers programs and experiences designed to bring ethics to the centre of our life. We offer counselling for individuals, leadership and development services, events, courses and educational resources. As a non-profit charity, we rely heavily on donations and memberships. Please visit the Ethics Centre website to find out more. Thank you.